My daughter left me a message. I have packed out of this hellhole. Don't bother looking for me. For 7 years, I didn't hear from her, and she blocked me from reaching out. Few years later, she showed up at my door after she heard I won the lottery. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, if you enjoy these kinds of stories, support us by subscribing to this channel. Click on the like button and tell us where you are watching us from in the comments section. Now let me tell you how everything unfolded. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't the normal kind you get after a long day when the house just feels still. It was heavier, like the air itself knew something had gone wrong. My feet dragged as I kicked off my work boots, back aching from the double shift. All I wanted was to microwave the leftover stew and collapse in front of the TV. But the moment I saw that envelope on the living room table, sitting dead center like someone had measured its placement, I knew my night wouldn't end with dinner and a remote. My name was written on the front in her handwriting, loopy and rushed, the way she always wrote when she was upset or didn't want to think too hard. That damn envelope stopped my breath. I stood there, still in my dust-covered work shirt, just staring at it like it might explode if I touched it. I picked it up with hands that suddenly didn't feel like mine. My fingers were trembling, but not from fatigue. Something colder was crawling up my spine. An instinct, maybe. A warning. I opened it slowly, carefully, like the paper itself could break. And then I read it. Just one line, scratched out in that familiar pen. I've packed from this hellhole. Please don't bother looking for me. That was it. No name. No reason. No love, your daughter. Just that. The words punched through my chest like someone had reached in and torn something loose. I read it again, hoping I'd missed something. That maybe it was a joke or a terrible misunderstanding. But it wasn't. I sat down, still holding the letter like it might vanish if I looked away. My daughter, my only child, had left me. Just like that. I don't think I moved for hours. The food stayed cold, the lights stayed on, and the house, once filled with her humming, her stomping around upstairs, or her blasting music while she cooked, was now just a shell. A museum of echoes. I thought back to that morning. She had barely looked up from her phone when I asked if she wanted pancakes. Said she wasn't hungry, that she was tired. She'd been distant lately, but I chalked it up to being 21, to growing pains, to the tension of trying to juggle college classes and part-time work. I never imagined she saw this place, our home, as a hellhole. I never imagined I was the thing she needed to run from. I sat there that night and tried to piece it together like a murder scene. Was it something I said? Something I didn't say? Was I too strict? Too distant? Or was it just that she didn't love me the way I loved her? Days turned into weeks. I went to work, I came home, and I pretended to function. But inside, I was unraveling. Every room in the house was a reminder. Her scent still lingered on the hoodie she left draped on the arm of the couch. Her toothbrush sat beside mine like she might come back any second. Her bedroom door stayed closed. I couldn't bring myself to go in. At first, I told myself it was temporary. Maybe she just needed space. Maybe she'd come back when she cooled off, or when she missed me, or when real life reminded her that not every father gives a damn the way I did. But the weeks became months, and then years. No calls. No texts. No birthday wishes. Nothing. It was like she had erased me from her life, and with every passing day, I started to wonder if I deserved it. People always say heartbreak is something that comes from lovers, but no one tells you how it feels when your own child, your blood, decides you're not worth staying for. That kind of pain, it doesn't just break you, it hollows you out. I became a shell of who I used to be. I stopped talking to neighbors. I stopped going out unless I had to. The only place I found peace was in motion, on the treadmill, with sweat pouring down my face and my lungs begging for air. That pain I could control. That pain had rules. So I worked out, read books, learned to cook new meals I ended up eating alone. It was all distraction. Anything to drown out the gnawing question that never left me. What did I do to make her hate me? There were nights I'd lie awake, just replaying old memories like movies in my mind. The time I carried her on my shoulders through the state fair, how she squealed when she won her first stuffed bear. The morning she graduated high school, beaming in that cap and gown, hugging me like I was her whole world. The night her mom died and she crawled into bed beside me, just 12 years old, and whispered, promise you'll never leave me." I kept that promise. I never left. But she did. And I never got the why. That's what haunted me most. Not just the leaving, but the silence that followed. Even after all that time, I never threw the letter away. I kept it tucked in my drawer, beneath the socks, folded neatly like some cruel artifact. I told myself it was a reminder, a warning, proof that even the people you die for can walk out without looking back. But truthfully, I kept it because a part of me hoped she'd come back someday. That maybe, just maybe, I'd hand it to her and ask the questions I never got to ask. I rehearsed those conversations in my head so many times they started to feel real. I'd picture her walking through that door, older now, maybe sorry, maybe not. But until that day came, all I had was that letter, and a lifetime of unanswered pain. Time has a way of dragging when your heart is in pieces. The first year without her felt like I was walking through molasses. Every day, just another weight tied to my chest. People assume the world keeps turning, that eventually you'll move on. Like grief is something you outgrow. But when it's your own child who disappears without a word, you don't just grieve the person. You grieve the role you played, the identity that vanished with them. I wasn't just a man left behind. I was a father with no one to father. I remember those mornings where I'd sit at the edge of my bed, sock in hand, forgetting how to start the day. The sun came through the blinds the same way it always had, but it never felt warm again. It was just light now, hollow and uninviting. My body went to work, lifted weights, walked grocery aisles, but my mind stayed stuck in the doorway where she had once stood, bags packed, heart closed. Somewhere around the third month, I started running. Not the casual jogs in the park kind. No, I ran like I was chasing something. Or maybe running from something. Either way, it helped. When my legs burned and my lungs felt like they'd collapse, it gave me a pain I could actually measure. That was the thing. Emotional pain doesn't come with stats. You can't track grief on a spreadsheet. But 5 miles at a 7-minute pace? That I could control. It gave me structure, rhythm. I made routines. Wake up, run, eat clean, hit the gym, read a new book. I became my own therapist, drilling discipline into every crack that heartbreak had left behind. Some of my coworkers said I was glowing up. One even joked that I looked 10 years younger. But they didn't see the man who still sat in his car after work, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles went white, trying not to scream into the empty air. I avoided people. Friends tried to invite me out, and I made excuses. Birthdays came and went, hers included. I baked her a cake the first year. Stupid, right? I stood in the kitchen with flour on my shirt and tears in my eyes, frosting a red velvet cake like she might walk through the door and laugh at how bad it looked. I didn't even eat it. I just left it on the table, staring at it until it went stale. After that, I stopped baking. I stopped celebrating anything, really. Holidays were the worst. Seeing fathers with their daughters in stores, on TV, in restaurants. It felt like the world was mocking me. I'd be standing in line at the gas station and hear some teenage girl whining to her dad about the wrong kind of chips, and I'd have to bite the inside of my cheek just to keep from breaking down right there between the candy aisle and the beer fridge. It wasn't just sadness I carried. There was anger too. That part crept in slow, like a rot. At first, I blamed myself for everything. I made a list in my head of every moment I could have done better, every argument I could have ended sooner, every time I should have said I love you instead of be careful or clean your room. But as the years passed, something shifted. I started to see her choice for what it was, not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, but a decision. She chose to leave. She wrote that letter. She vanished, knowing damn well it would destroy me. And she never reached out. Not once. Not even a text to say she was alive. That kind of silence isn't an accident. It's a statement. And as much as it broke my heart, I had to accept it for what it was. My daughter didn't want me in her life. No explanation. No closure. Just a locked door and 7 years of silence. So I stopped begging the universe for answers. I stopped praying for her return. I started living like a man who had no one left to impress. That's when everything began to change. The more I focused on my own well-being, the more the weight on my shoulders started to shift. I found a new rhythm in solitude. I took up reading again, not self-help or philosophy, but novels, stories that let me live in other people's worlds for a while. I rebuilt my house piece by piece. New kitchen tiles, fresh paint, backyard garden. My home stopped being a graveyard and became something closer to a sanctuary. I put up blinds in her room, turned it into a library. It wasn't disrespect. It was survival. I needed the space to reflect who I was becoming, not who I had lost. It was on one of those regular, nothing special days, on a Tuesday, I think, that everything changed. I was at the gas station, same place I'd always filled up, when I got a notification on my phone. I had won. The lottery. My first thought wasn't excitement. It was disbelief. I must have read those numbers 5 times before I believed they matched. But when the shock wore off, it hit me like a thunderclap. My life had just changed forever. I wasn't just healing anymore. I was reborn. I took the lump sum. Bought a new house on the outskirts of town, modern, spacious, everything I used to dream about when I was scraping by paycheck to paycheck. I bought a black Rolls Royce, not because I needed it, but because I could. For the first time in years, I felt untouchable. Free. But with freedom came a strange kind of loneliness. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I had chosen solitude, yes, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I'd lie in bed and wonder what she would think if she saw me now. Would she be proud? Would she think I bought happiness? Would she regret what she did? I didn't want to need those answers anymore. But the truth is, they still whispered in the corners of my mind. I told myself I wouldn't let her back in even if she came crawling. That I had earned peace and wouldn't trade it for chaos. But part of me still imagined the day she might show up. Older, humbled, maybe even sorry. And then one afternoon, just like that, the doorbell rang. The sound of the doorbell didn't register right away. I had just come in from a morning drive, my usual route through the winding back roads outside the city, top down on the rolls, jazz spilling out from the speakers. It had become a routine I cherished. Coffee in the cup holder, sunglasses on, wind slicing through whatever remnants of sadness still clung to me. That car wasn't just a status symbol. It was therapy on 4 wheels. I'd never been a flashy man, but after years of quiet suffering, I wanted to feel like I had won something. That car reminded me that pain didn't get to write the final chapter of my life. I parked it neatly in the driveway, the sun gleaming off its polished hood like a trophy. I'd barely gotten inside, kicked off my shoes, and poured a glass of water when the bell rang. It was sharp, insistent, not the casual press of a delivery man, but the firm jab of someone determined to be let in. I walked to the door with a lazy pace, half expecting it to be a neighbor or some campaigner. Maybe someone curious about the car. People asked about it often. But the moment I opened it, my body locked in place. There she was, my daughter, standing on my doorstep like she hadn't vanished into thin air 7 years ago. She looked different, older, of course she did. But there was still something unmistakable in her eyes, something stubborn and unshaken. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore a faded hoodie and jeans that looked 2 sizes too big. She smiled like it was any other day, like we were still a father and daughter, and this was just a surprise visit. "It's not even been 10 years, and you've forgotten your lovely daughter already?" she said, her voice coated with forced humor. Like the pain she caused was a sitcom punchline. I didn't smile. I didn't open the door any wider. I just stood there, staring. There's a moment, a split second, when everything in your body wants to react, but your soul holds it all back. I wanted to yell. I wanted to ask where the hell she'd been, why she left, why she never called. But instead, I looked her in the eye and said flatly, "Who are you?" That wiped the grin off her face. She blinked, a little thrown, and shifted her stance. "Come on, Dad," she said, more serious now. "Don't be like that. I was young. I was dumb. I made mistakes. I thought maybe." She looked past me into the house. "Maybe we could talk." I didn't move. I told her to wait outside. I turned and walked away, knowing she'd either stay or go, but it wouldn't change what I had to do next. I headed straight to my bedroom and opened the drawer, the same one I'd kept untouched all these years. The letter was still there, folded tight, the ink slightly faded but the words still sharp. I walked back slowly, the paper in my hand like a blade I was finally ready to use. When I stepped back outside, she was still there, arms crossed, shifting her weight from foot to foot like a child in trouble. I held the letter out, and her eyes widened when she saw it. "You're surprised I still have this trash you left behind, right?" I said, my voice steady, calm. Too calm. She didn't answer at first, just stared at the paper like it might burn her fingers. "I was being childish," she said finally, a practiced excuse. "I was overwhelmed. I didn't know how to talk to you back then. But I've changed. I really have." She took a step closer, eyes flicking toward the car parked in the driveway. "You got yourself a car, huh? That's nice." The shift in her tone didn't escape me. It was subtle, but it was there. The curiosity, the calculation. I could almost see the gears turning in her mind, doing the math. Expensive car. Big house. No family around. She was piecing it together. That was the moment something inside me shut off for good. Not because she noticed the car. Not because she commented on it. But because it wasn't me she saw. It was what I had. After all this time, she came back not because she missed me, not because she regretted what she did, but because she had nothing left and I had something to give. She thought her reappearance would be enough. That her absence could be explained away with a shrug and a weak apology. That I would be so desperate for love, for her, that I'd throw open the gates and welcome her back like nothing happened. But I wasn't the man she left behind. That man had waited. This man had learned how to live without waiting. I stepped back inside and pressed the intercom. "Security," I said. "Please come to the front. Escort a trespasser off the property." Her eyes flared. "Dad? What the hell?" she snapped, dropping the fake warmth. "You're really going to do this? After everything?" I met her gaze with a steel she didn't recognize. "There was no everything," I said. "You made sure of that 7 years ago." The guards arrived within minutes. 2 men in black uniforms who knew better than to ask questions. They walked her to the curb as she shouted behind her shoulder, "You're pathetic. You think money makes you better than me." I watched from the doorway, arms crossed, heart heavy but steady. She was gone before she ever returned. And this time, I didn't flinch. The silence that followed was different from the one she left behind years ago. It wasn't hollow or painful. It was clean, final. I walked back into the house, shut the door, and sat down at the kitchen table with the letter still in my hand. I stared at it one last time before ripping it in half, then in half again, until it was nothing but scraps. I dropped the pieces into the trash and turned on the sink, washing my hands like I'd touched something filthy. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just breathed. Deep, slow, and free. The rest of that day unfolded like a dream I couldn't quite wake up from. Not a nightmare exactly, but one of those strange, heavy dreams where nothing feels real, where your limbs are too slow and your thoughts are too loud. After she left, or rather, after I had her removed, I walked through my house in slow circles, unsure what to do with myself. It should have felt like a victory, I guess. Like closure. I'd faced the ghost that haunted me, and I'd sent it packing. But standing in my pristine kitchen, staring at my untouched lunch, I realized that part of me was still buzzing with aftershocks. I replayed her voice over and over in my head. "You got yourself a car, huh?" That one line felt like someone spitting in my face after years of begging for their forgiveness. It wasn't curiosity or pride. It was greed, thinly veiled behind a fake smile. Like my worth only existed now that there was something material she could hold on to. I spent the evening in the garage, wiping down the rolls even though it was spotless. I kept my hand moving, cloth gliding over the deep black curves of the hood, as if polishing the car could erase the film of her presence. She hadn't touched it, hadn't even gotten near it, but it felt tainted somehow, like her eyes had left a residue. I remembered how she used to roll her eyes at me when I talked about dreams. Back when she still lived here, still spoke to me like I mattered, I'd once told her that I wanted to own a Rolls one day. She laughed and said that was old man rich, not real rich. It stung then. Now it echoed. I wondered if she thought I got lucky, if she assumed I had stumbled into wealth the same way she stumbled back into my life. Unexpected and unwelcome. But this wasn't luck. It was survival. I earned every ounce of peace in this house, every inch of leather in that car, every square foot of solitude. I built this version of me from the rubble she left behind. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not the neighbors, not my coworkers from the job I left behind, not even the few friends who still called once a month to check in. This was mine to process. I didn't want to hear anyone's take on it. Didn't want to explain how it felt to look your own child in the face and realize they didn't return for love. I kept thinking about that moment at the door, how her smile faltered the second I didn't play along. How quickly she shifted when I asked, "Who are you?" As if the question itself was absurd. But the truth is, I didn't know her anymore. The girl who used to fall asleep in the back seat during long drives, who called me from college crying because she failed her first exam, who hugged me too tight on Mother's Day because we were both still learning to live without her mom. That girl was gone. The woman who stood on my porch wasn't someone I recognized. She was colder, sharper, like life had taught her to be hard and proud of it. And I wasn't about to let that hardness break through the walls I'd spent years rebuilding. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in the living room with the lights off, the flicker of the fireplace throwing long shadows on the walls. I watched the flames and listened to the stillness. I thought about what I might have said if I'd let her in. Maybe I would have asked her why she left without saying goodbye. Maybe I would have asked if she ever looked back. Maybe I would have screamed, or maybe I would have cried. But none of that happened. And I realized, in that moment, that I didn't need it to. Closure didn't come from the words we say to people. It came from the boundaries we refused to bend anymore. I had been bending for her since the day she was born. I bent when her mother died, when she lashed out, when she skipped school, when she slammed doors and told me I didn't understand her. I always found a way to justify her pain, because I believed it was my job to carry it. But at some point, she stopped seeing me as someone worth understanding. She stopped bending for me. And when she walked out of my life with nothing but a cruel note and 7 years of silence, she made her boundaries loud and clear. I slept soundly for the first time in months that night. No tossing, no dreams. Just deep, uninterrupted rest. And when I woke up the next morning, I felt lighter, like something heavy had finally been pulled from my chest. I made a full breakfast. Eggs, toast, avocado, the works, and I ate every bite. I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll social media to see if she'd posted anything cryptic about me. I didn't care. Let her say whatever she wanted. Let the world think whatever it would. I knew my truth, and I had the scars to prove it. I went about my day as usual. Grocery shopping, gym, a long drive out to the lake where I used to take her fishing when she was little. I stood on the dock and watched the water for a while, remembering her tiny hands clutching the fishing rod, her squeal when she caught her first bass. That was a good memory, and I let it be just that, a memory, not a hook to drag me backward, just something I used to hold and now could release. Later that week, I got a voicemail. She hadn't called me directly. She must have used another number. The message was short, rushed, and filled with emotion she hadn't shown at the door. "I can't believe you did that to me. I needed help, Dad. I thought you'd understand. But I guess you only care about your car and your new life. You're not the man who raised me." I listened to it twice. The first time, I felt that old sting in my chest. The second time, I just laughed. Not a joyful laugh, but the kind that slips out when something ridiculous finally snaps you out of your feelings. I deleted the voicemail and blocked the number. I didn't need guilt dressed up as entitlement. She left me to figure out my life alone, and I had. She didn't get to walk back in and rewrite history because now the scenery had changed. It didn't take long for the fallout to find its way beyond my front porch. Maybe I was naive to think it would stay between us, that the confrontation would end the moment I closed the door. But children, no matter how old they get, still believe the world should bend when they cry foul. I should have known that being rich, alone, and resolute would paint me as the villain in her version of events. It started with a Facebook post. I don't have an account myself, but my neighbor Deirdre, nosy but kind, knocked on my door one evening with her iPad clutched to her chest like it was a confession. "I thought you should see this," she said, her voice laced with caution. I didn't want to look. I really didn't. But the second I saw my name tagged in that public post, framed by words like abandonment, betrayal, and greed, I knew privacy had left the building. She had posted a photo of my house, the gate, the driveway, and the unmistakable Rolls-Royce gleaming in the corner of the frame. The caption read like a diary entry wrapped in weaponized nostalgia. "Came to see my father after 7 years, hoping to reconnect. Got thrown out by his security like I was nothing. Money really changes people. I guess family doesn't matter when you're rich. The likes piled up. Comments ranged from sympathy to outrage. A few mutual acquaintances chimed in, people I hadn't spoken to in years, questioning what kind of man turns his back on his child. Some even messaged me directly, co-workers from the old job, a cousin I hadn't seen since my brother's funeral, even a pastor from our former church. Everyone suddenly had an opinion, armed with half a story and the assumption that wealth had turned me cold. But none of them had been there at my door. None of them had watched her eyes shift from apology to calculation the moment she saw what she could take. I didn't respond. Not publicly. Not privately. I let the noise swell and fall like a storm I refused to acknowledge. Let them think I was cruel. Let them think I had changed. What they didn't see were the 7 years of silence. The unanswered calls that never came. The birthdays that passed like ghosts. They didn't see the letter, her goodbye note carved in casual cruelty, that I had held on to longer than I cared to admit. They saw a rich man and an estranged daughter and filled in the blanks with their own fantasies. I refused to give them a performance, but it shook me more than I'd expected. For days, I felt like I was walking through my own house wearing someone else's skin. Every time I passed the living room window, I half expected reporters to be outside, waiting to ask about the family feud. I kept the blinds closed. The garage door stayed shut. I told security to screen visitors twice before buzzing them through the gate. What caught me most off guard wasn't the noise from strangers. It was the silence from people I thought would understand. My brother, who I hadn't seen since Mom's funeral, sent me a one-line text. Is it true? I didn't bother replying. My cousin Rachel, who used to babysit my daughter when she was small, tagged her in a comment under the post saying, "You're so brave, sweetie. So sorry you went through this." That one stung more than I cared to admit. Rachel had stood in my kitchen not 3 Christmases ago, crying over her divorce and thanking me for being the last good man left in this family. People are quick to rewrite their memories when a better story comes along. And heartbreak? That never makes for good PR. I realized then that no matter how hard you work to become a better version of yourself, someone, somewhere will always prefer the worst version of you, because it fits their narrative better. Despite the storm, I didn't break. I stuck to my routines. I cooked my meals. I lifted weights like I was trying to throw grief off my shoulders. I took long drives with the music louder than usual. I even started volunteering at a local community center on weekends. Not because I needed to prove anything to anyone, but because I needed to remember that empathy could still exist without attachment. The kids there didn't know my story. They just knew I showed up, listened to their stories, and helped them fix broken bikes and failing grades. They reminded me that not all wounds are permanent, that sometimes people hurt you not because they hate you, but because they never learned how to love you right. And sometimes, that's all the clarity you need. One afternoon, I came home to find a handwritten note stuffed under the front gate. No envelope, no return address, just folded paper caught between the iron bars like it had been wedged in desperation. I opened it slowly, already knowing who it was from. The writing was hers, still loopy, still uneven. I didn't mean for things to blow up. I just needed help. I'm sorry if it looked like I was using you. I wasn't. I just didn't know where else to go. I've been sleeping in my car. Please, Dad, just talk to me. I stood there with the paper in hand, the late afternoon sun casting a long shadow over the driveway. For a moment, I felt the old ache, the instinct to rescue, to forgive, to gather her up like I used to when she scraped her knees. But that instinct had a cost, and I had already paid it in full. I didn't respond. I folded the letter back up and placed it in the drawer where her first note had once lived. Not out of sentiment, but out of memory. A reminder that some doors, once closed, stay closed for a reason. I had given her everything once. Time, love, shelter, patience. And she had walked away, left me with silence, and then had the audacity to return not with humility, but expectation. People like to throw the word forgiveness around like it's the cure for everything. But sometimes, the most honest thing you can do is draw a line so deep in the sand it becomes a wall. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. The quiet felt different now. Not hollow, not menacing, just still. It was the kind of silence that didn't demand anything from me. Not forgiveness, not guilt, not even memory. It simply existed, like a soft background hum that let me breathe without the weight of someone else's expectations pressing down on my chest. I spent more time in the backyard lately, where the wind moved through the hedges in a way that reminded me of waves. I planted a row of lavender bushes along the fence and installed a small fountain near the center of the lawn. Something about the sound of trickling water soothed my thoughts, like the world, no matter how chaotic, would always find a rhythm again if you let it. I didn't wait for phone calls anymore. I didn't scan the driveway for uninvited guests. I didn't hold my breath when the mail came, expecting another note or another jab disguised as an apology. I just lived, day by day, moment by moment. And that, I realized, was enough. I began writing again. Nothing formal, nothing I'd ever publish, just thoughts and observations jotted into a black leather-bound journal I kept beside my bed. Some entries were mundane, grocery lists, quotes from books, memories I didn't want to lose. Others were heavier. Letters I'd never sent. Emotions I didn't speak aloud. One page, in particular, stood out among the rest. I titled it, "If You Ever Come Back Again." In it, I didn't scold or accuse. I didn't recount the pain or the public betrayal. I just told her the truth, the kind of truth that sits at the bottom of a man's heart when everything else has been stripped away. I wrote that I loved her, that I always would, that loving her didn't mean letting her in, that being her father didn't mean being her doormat. I wrote that boundaries were not walls, they were doors with locks. And sometimes, the most loving thing a parent can do is lock that door when their child keeps breaking everything inside. I think that's the part people never understand unless they've lived it. Love isn't always about letting people in. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stop the bleeding. We're told that family means forever, that blood outweighs betrayal, that forgiveness is some kind of spiritual upgrade. But no one talks about the years spent stitching yourself back together after someone walks out of your life like you never mattered. No one prepares you for the guilt of being the one who finally says enough. I didn't stop loving her. I stopped abandoning myself to prove it. That was the difference. That was the lesson. People called me cold, said I let money change me. But money didn't change me. Heartbreak did. Silence did. 7 years of wondering where she was and if she was safe, of blaming myself for her absence, of waking up in the middle of the night thinking I heard her car pull into the driveway. That changed me. One Saturday afternoon, a mutual friend ran into me at the bookstore. He looked surprised to see me, said I looked calmer than he remembered. He hesitated before asking about her. I told him the truth. I hadn't heard from her in a while. He nodded like he knew more than he was saying, like maybe he'd seen her or spoken to her, but I didn't press. I didn't need to know. I didn't ask how she was doing or where she was staying or if she was still posting about me online. That part of the story wasn't mine to follow anymore. I had taken my hand off the steering wheel of her life, and the relief of not being responsible for her choices anymore was something I wore like armor. He asked if I missed her. I paused, then said, "I miss who I thought she was." That answer hung in the air between us like smoke, neither of us sure how to clear it. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and a glass of red wine in my hand. I watch the sky shift from blue to purple to black, and I think about all the things I've learned in the silence she left behind. I've learned that people will always tell you what kind of love they expect, but very few will tell you what kind they're willing to give. I've learned that absence doesn't always mean loss. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes letting someone go is the most merciful thing you can do for both of you. And I've learned that peace, true peace, isn't loud or triumphant. It's quiet. It's steady. It's a man sitting alone in his home, no longer waiting for the knock of someone who didn't care enough to stay in the first place. I don't know if she'll ever come back again. Maybe one day she'll show up not with expectation, but with humility. Maybe she'll understand that love without respect is just manipulation in prettier clothes. Maybe she won't. Maybe she's already written me off as the heartless man who chose comfort over connection. But whatever she decides, I know who I am now. I'm the man who survived being forgotten. I'm the father who still holds love in his heart, but keeps the door locked to protect what's left. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. I'm just done bleeding for someone who never brought a bandage. If you've ever had to choose peace over family, If you've ever drawn a line to protect your heart from the very people who were supposed to love you most, then you know the cost of keeping that door closed. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from someone you once would have done anything for? I want to hear your story. Let's talk about what it really means to protect your peace. See you soon in the next story.